Okay, so we're about to start with our next presenter. So I guess it'll be kind of a working lunch. Feel free to keep eating. So our next presenter is Dr. Kaitlin Cornelius, and she's from Old Dominion University, the Virginia Modeling, Analysis, and Simulation Center. And she's going to be talking about motivations of the cyber criminal.
Thank you. Am I able to place this, or do I have to hold it?
You can place it up here, and then this will
We'll see if this works. Oh gosh. I think so. Can everybody hear me? Sort of? Yeah? Or maybe? Good enough.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah, it's already.
and we're good? Okay.
All right.
Very good, thank you. So, good afternoon. My name is Kaitlin Cornelius. I am a criminologist, as he said, at VMask over at ODU. And today my talk is going to concern kind of the idea of merging the two fields of cybersecurity, cyberpsychology, and criminology, which traditionally haven't merged as nicely as we would like to see. Unfortunately, I've only got 45 minutes here, and I tend to be a bit verbose. And if you've ever sat in a theory class or in a philosophy class, these can be kind of dense when we start talking about theories, and we could talk for days about examples and making sure we understand things. So my goal here is really just to scratch the surface and kind of try to provide some scope of what the possibilities are here, and maybe offer some suggestions of how we can move forward in terms of developing the research. So that's kind of the goal. Are you able to hear? Okay. So to accomplish this goal today, I'm going to follow these steps. So just in case you're still snacking or you're tuning into the Comey testimony for a couple minutes and then you look back up, you'll have a general idea of where I am, sort of, hopefully. So first, I'm going to give you a little... This would happen to me. Okay. No, it's good. It's a little icebreaker. Takes the edge off. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to give a little bit of background, and then go into a little bit of the demographics. No hard numbers there for reasons I'll explain in a little bit. Then I'd like to go into a few different typologies. We in criminology really like typologies, and I think they might be helpful here in this topic. Then I want to explore some of the theories that I think would really work here, and maybe discuss some directions for future research. So. As we've seen, the impact of cybercrime on a global scale is significant. Losses and damages attributable to global cybercrime demand further research and better understanding of the crime itself, and that's where I think criminologists could really help out. Criminology as a field is concerned with the behavior patterns of the whole group. So we are generalizing. We tend to ignore the anomalies and hope they don't show up. We leave those to other people, generally speaking. The field of cybersecurity employs many different resources in combating cybercrime and cyberterrorism, but one of the often underutilized tools is the field of criminology itself. Bossler and Burris in 2012, two criminologists who dabble in cybersecurity, I think summed it up really well when they said many of the issues and policies regarding cybersecurity are too technical and beyond the skills and knowledge of traditional criminologists trained in sociology. Very true. I can turn the computer on, I can turn it off, I can work the internet. That's the extent. But one of criminology's best contributions to cybersecurity, however, is the application of previously established criminological theories created for the physical world and understanding crimes within that world that are applicable to the virtual world. Criminology as a social science has about 100 years worth of, are we okay? Okay. Has about 100 years worth of these established theories and methodologies, and instead of just reinventing the wheel in cybersecurity, perhaps we could look at what's already been established. I knew me not holding this thing was going to be a problem, but I have to talk with my hands. I need free hands. Are we good now? Can everybody hear me? Or acknowledge? Okay. we're not boring, right? So, anyway, moving right along. I want to start by addressing some of the demographics. And we're not going to be talking hard and fast numbers here because cybercrime and cyberterrorism fall into what we as criminologists refer to as the dark figure of crime. These are crimes that we know are happening because we have some measure of impact or damages or victimization of some sort, but it becomes very difficult to measure the actual amount of crimes happening. Reporting issues come into play here. Here we also see the convergence of criminology, street crime, and a virtual crime in such with the following example. We have a very large dark figure of sexual assault crimes and domestic violence. Why? Those are underreported crimes, right? Same with drug abuse. No one's going to run to the cops and say, hey, smoked a bunch of pot last night, right? No one does that. So we don't know the exact amount of crimes that are happening. Same with cybercrimes. We have a measurement of damages. We have some measurement of impact or victimization. But a security firm isn't going to go running to the authorities and say, hey, we got hacked, right? That calls into question their credibility and their ability to perform their duties. So it's an underreported crime. That being said, though, we do, when we examine the literature and the studies that are out there, the few that are there, done by criminologists, we have some trends. Our trends in criminology tend to match what the other fields are noticing as well. So this is an area where we can all kind of work together. These are not the only demographics. These are not the only trends. These are just a few that I highlighted that I thought would be interesting to talk about today. As I saw referenced in the previous discussion, we tend to assume that offenders are going to be male. There's a couple of reasons that this could be. The first is a psychosexual explanation. The idea that the anonymity of cyberspace allows the individual to engage in some sort of sexual inclinations from an anonymous point of view. The other one that I think the social sciences is more interested in is the social construction of gender. And even though we're seeing some differences today, historically, the social construction of gender has been in such a way that all things technical and techie have sort of fallen into the male realm, and therefore those within that realm who decide to go deviant tend to also be male. Mid-20s age range, again, this is not to say that every single cyber criminal is in that age range. There are anomalies. But this tends to be an age group that has less responsibilities, less to lose if caught, less investment to lose if they dabble in this type of crime. We've seen that they can tend to be outcasts, no surprise there. Adhering to what I think we could also add, outcasts, non-mainstream, we could use the word subgroup or subcultures also, as we've discussed. In criminology, anytime you see the word subgroup, you can substitute the word gangs. So all the street gang literature in criminology suddenly becomes applicable to understanding these subgroups within the cybercrime realm. Mental health experts, I thought this was an interesting one to include here, have done a few studies on the proportion of what they classify as disease-prone persons or self-healing persons. Now the studies are not that in-depth. They don't really understand the proportion of disease-prone individuals to self-healing individuals within the cybercrime world. But it's an interesting thing worth examining. Disease-prone, just to clarify, they're saying these are the individuals who perhaps don't deal well with normal stressors, don't recover well from stress, perhaps don't employ healthy lifestyle habits, maybe there's substance abuse, chronic diseases, that sort of thing. So it's just an interesting perspective that is worth exploring. And then your type A personalities, perfectionists, task-oriented, overachievers. They just so happen to be overachieving crime. So, moving right on. So those were some demographics. I have 3 different types of typologies that I want to discuss here that I think might be helpful. The first here, again, these are not the only types of crime in the cybercrime world, but these are the big ones that we tend to see over and over and over again in the news and whatnot. I'm sure we could expand on this list if we were to sit here long enough. But these are just the context of some of the examples I'm going to be providing. The second typology that I want to discuss here is the typology of offenders. So here we're not quite dabbling yet into motivations. We're trying to classify the types of offenders. And this is interesting because if you look into this, it depends on the author with regard to what terms you actually get, but they're all describing kind of the same things. So I have the wannabes here. These are the people with the soft skills, that like to hit soft targets. They're amateurs. The scammers are the too good to be true. When you get an email and it says, send me $10,000 and I'll send you $10 million because I'm this person who's inherited all this money and blah, blah, blah. I think we all have a friend who's fallen victim to that. Then you have your legit hackers, your phishers, your political groups or foreign governments, and then your insiders, which insider threat, as we all know, is a hot buzzword right now. Everybody's trying to understand the insider threat idea. So there's our typology of offenders. The thing we're most interested in, though, is the motivations of the types of offenders. So hopefully it makes sense why I'm going through all these steps here. At first glance, it might really seem that we have just way too many typologies. We need to just cut it out with the typologies. But they build on each other, and they provide a language that I, as a criminologist, and you as a psychologist, or the actual cybercrime, the technical aspect expert, all of us can communicate by following this language that different typologies put out. And having this uniform language, I think, will help in terms of further research and understanding the whole picture here. So an example, building upon these other ones, we could say we have, just taking the first one there, you have the thrill seeker, right? The person who's bored, looking for some excitement. You could have a thrill seeker motivated wannabe from the previous slide, right? Hacker from the even previous one. So we can see how these things build on each other in terms of identifying more exactly what's going on. So now I'll jump into the theories a little bit, and this is where I tend to get a bit verbose. So if I do, I apologize. The first one I want to talk about is routine activities theory. Routine activities theory is something that criminologists generally hate. I love it. I think it's awesome. Everyone else in other fields really likes it. And I think the appeal is that you have these three elements that are very easy to describe. They're very easy to measure. They make a lot of sense. This is, a common sense approach to understanding crime. Routine activities theory says that crime occurs when you have the convergence of three elements. A motivated offender, a capable guardian, a suitable target, and the absence of a capable guardian, right? So we could go into each one of those different elements and further break it down, and we could use different examples. We could measure that. What exactly constitutes a motivated offender? What exactly constitutes a suitable target? What exactly is the absence of a capable guardian? What is a capable guardian? So these, I think routine activities presents a great starting point. If we were to use the street crime example of routine activities, we could say a college campus has a parking lot. Perhaps it's not well lit, right? And suddenly they're experiencing an uptick in car burglaries or break-ins or whatnot, right? So there we have a suitable target, a car. We have a motivated offender, someone who is, for whatever reason, motivated to steal out of that car. We have the absence of a capable guardian. Let's say that we don't heavily patrol that area with campus PD. Let's say that there are no street lamps in that area, so it's not a well-lit area. That's a classic example of street crime application of routine activities theory. We could take that same theory with those same components and apply it to a virtual world, right? We could say that you have a suitable target. Let's say you have a banking institution. That banking institution fails to utilize good safety mechanisms. They don't have whatever security devices in place they need to have, right? So that's the absence of a capable guardian, and we have a whole world full of motivated offenders who would just like to poach on that banking institution that isn't protected. So we can see how these theories would work like that. I've seen some criminologists suggest heavily that online harassment and malware victimization specifically is a good starting point for research applying routine activities theory. The next two theories I want to discuss here, strain theory I think is really relevant to the cybercrime discussion and hasn't received a whole lot of attention. Strain theory, in its most simplest form, says that strain and stress result from the individual just going through their daily life and encountering either roadblocks or the absence of legitimate means of achieving success. So here in America, we talked about culture in the previous presentation. We are socialized, or it is our culture, and in many other countries as well, that you must achieve. You must go be educated, go get a job, go meet that special person, buy the house, have babies, all that whole thing. The keeping up with the Joneses idea is very relevant here. Now, if we remove the legitimate means that you have of achieving those goals that society says you must have, strain and stress ensue, and therefore crime, right? So the classic street crime example, let's say we have the student who's trying to prep for their exams. They just don't have enough time in the day, right? They're working real hard, they're stressed out, they've got to get an A on this exam. Maybe because of the stress and strain of needing to attain that goal, but not being able to do it in a legitimate means, they call up the campus drug dealer and get that supply of Adderall illegally, right? So crime ensues as a response to the stress. We could take the same theory and apply it to the cybercrime world. Let's say we have that insider threat. We don't understand why someone would turn on their company and steal, embezzle money via their online access that they had to the company's server or whatnot, whatever crime they did. But then we examine it further and we find out that the employee, the insider threat, had a spouse or a child that was just diagnosed with cancer. Cancer is an expensive disease, right? You might be motivated then. You don't have a legitimate means of achieving, and therefore, because of the stress and strain, you turn towards the crime. So that could be a good application here. Social learning theory is another one that's really important and relevant to understanding cybercrime. Social learning theory essentially says that crime is learned, but learned in two ways. The technical element, that is the actual skills involved. Hackers all run together, they teach each other their little tricks, and then they go wreak havoc, right? But they also, at the same time, are teaching each other how to rationalize and justify their behavior. So it's a two-part social learning process there that could be really applicable to both the digital software piracy and hacking crimes. I've seen some researchers suggest that that would be a very reasonable starting point for that type of research. Oops, so many things. Another theory I'd like to talk about are the techniques of neutralization. Sykes and Matza, and the reason I put all these dates up here, the names, of course, are relevant. There's many more names that we could build on and list all day long, but I'll spare you. The dates I've put on here to demonstrate that these are really well-established theories. And if you've been studying this topic long enough, you might see that there's some overlap. Maybe you've read another author who calls it a different thing. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here, is that I think if all these different fields are going to be working together on this, we might need to synthesize and start re-examining the language that we're using. But anyway, so techniques of neutralization is kind of building upon the idea of the social learning theory in that, how do I want to start here? So we all have internal mechanisms of control, right? We all woke up this morning and went through our routine and put clothes on before coming here today, right? Because society says you must be dressed to go out in public. Likewise, if you are thirsty on your way home and you see a 7-Eleven and you stop, your thought is, do I have cash in my wallet? Your thought is not, can I just go in there and take it? The internal mechanisms of control are so well defined in your brain that you just skip the possibility of engaging in criminal behavior because our bonds within society are so strong, right? So that's the idea. Crime occurs when the individual's internal mechanisms of control fail to control the behavior and stop them from committing crimes. Now, all of these theories are always argued back and forth, but I think an interesting point here that we could examine is what exactly leads to the building of the internal mechanisms of control. Are we talking about a deterrent effect? Is the tough on crime policy going to work there? Or are we talking about the individual's unwillingness to disappoint their family members or that sort of thing? Is it more of a social bond type thing? So that's a point of research that we could really look into there. General theory of crime is another one that's very interesting. This is one that's hotly debated within criminology, but this is one that I actually saw criminologists testing in the cybersecurity world. This is not one that would have made the list had I not found those studies, because I'm just not a fan. General theory of crime says that everyone is super hedonistic. Every move you make, every thought, every action, every life stage has to do with your own pursuit of your personal happiness and pleasure. That's what it says. And those who commit crimes do so because they have no self-control. So if you think about that for a second, you're saying all crimes are the result of the individual's inability to control themselves. Now you're perhaps seeing why I don't particularly like this one. But I saw a study where it was applied to college-age hackers. So essentially, they were testing the idea that these hackers were engaging in their behavior because they just couldn't control themselves. I don't know. I just don't see how that one could really work. But it wasn't my study. So where can we go from here with all these theories? I know I sped over them very quickly. And I'm happy to go back if anyone has questions. I know theories are obnoxious like that, and I know that this is a talk and not a dialogue, but if I need to clarify, I'm more than happy to do so. Many of the typologies and the theories that I've discussed, they pair well together, and they kind of naturally form to help answer some of the questions that the cybersecurity realm might have. A lot of the street gang theories, like I mentioned, in the literature, we just have an abundance of street gang literature would really apply. Even if we're talking about cyber criminals who are acting individually, at some point in time they've come in contact with a subgroup of some sort or a subculture that has helped shape their views and vision towards acceptable behavior and implanted those justifications and those rationalizations for why it's acceptable to engage in that type of behavior. The strain theories applicable to outsiders or those that find it difficult to interact in real life, that you can see how that is just a natural pairing there. Those who partake in a larger society setting who are told you must go achieve these goals, and then because they don't perhaps do well person to person or they do better online, find themselves pulling away a little bit and experiencing that strain and engaging in that criminal behavior online. Further investigation is really needed. The replication of perhaps previously conducted studies, we could use that as a starting point moving forward from there, just altering the context a little bit to make it applicable to the cybercrime realm. I lost my place. And as I said previously, we really need to further synthesize these typologies, operationalize the variables so that we are using a similar language. I'm sure you guys can really agree. We saw examples today where it's almost like we're all from different countries and we're saying, what does your country call this concept? What does your country call this concept? And in order for us to be able to share our findings and our research, we've got to find a common terminology. And I'm not necessarily saying that one is better than the other, but just being on the same page in some way, shape, or form would be a really good starting point, I think, in terms of moving forward. So I am way ahead of time. I flew through a lot of stuff. So does anyone have questions about theories or want to talk about any of the stuff that I just presented?
I don't know anything about crime.
That's okay. I don't know anything about computers.
So,
We'll get through this
I
together.
don't do crime.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm very busy. So what I was, you know, like, if you look at it just from the theoretical point of view, let's say, I know you guys are a big fan of the bell curve.
Bell curve in what? Like looking for an average, you mean, or?
Most of the literature usually, I see them always using bell curve. People finding within 95% interval, if you fall there, you're normal. And if you fall outside, we're gonna put you in a straight jacket. What I mean is.
You mean the psychology
if you fall
literature?
outside of the 95% interval,
Okay.
that's considered social deviance, right?
Well, the technical definition of deviancy is any action that goes against the norm. And the norm is relative, right? So we could take a look at what the subculture has established as its norms, and you could be right in line, but larger society could be looking at that and saying that's deviant. So that 95%, or the bell curve threshold, whatever we want to refer to it as, it becomes relative depending on the society that you matriculate in. And that's why I think the delving into the culture of the subgroups and applying the literature that we have to subgroups and how they operate could be really relevant here. I don't know if that answers your question or, yeah. Yes, question?
Where in any of these theories does the fear of getting caught, potentially getting caught, and the cost
Sure.
to the criminal of potential punishment fit in?
Yeah.
I've long been of the persuasion that that's one of the problems with cybercrime is we don't punish it.
Yeah.
The reason people don't rob 7-Elevens is not because there's a lot of firewalls.
Sure.
7-Elevens, there's plenty of money.
Yeah.
But they don't want to get caught, get punished. But
Yeah.
We don't have that phenomena for lots of cybercrime.
Sure. I had this internal debate when I was trying to decide which theories were most appropriate to highlight for this. And I stayed away from deterrence theory. It's called deterrence theory. It's one of the earliest crime theories, Bentham, Beccaria, we're talking 1800s, just deserts, that sort of thing. Deterrence manifests itself in one of two ways. You have direct deterrence, where the individual is caught and they are punished, and therefore they don't commit a crime ever again. Or you have the type of deterrence where, let's say you commit a crime, we catch you, we punish you, and everyone who watched us punish you, they don't commit crimes because they're scared it'll happen to them. So those are the two different ways that deterrence manifests itself. What we have found, though, within the field of criminology is that deterrence is very difficult to measure, right? You're essentially measuring an inaction. We can't get in our time machines and go backwards and say, we could do a self-report study and ask people, did you not commit this crime because you were scared of getting caught? But again, we run into some issues there. The theories take into account that, I guess, coming back to your original question, do they account for deterrence? But it's something that we tend to stay away from because we know that motivations for crime are not so simplistic as will I get caught or not, particularly when you look at the different types of motivations. So like the example I just mentioned where, let's say we have a strain situation. Okay, classic street crime example of strain theory applied is this thing called collateral sanctions. So we arrest you for a felony, you now have a felony conviction, you serve your time, slate's supposed to be clean, right? We put you back out into society, but because you have this felony conviction, you now can't get a job, you can't get social aid, housing aid, educational aid. You have no means of supporting yourself in a legitimate manner, right? And hopefully that's making that click when I said like a legitimate means of achieving the goals. So what is your only option to survive? To go back to committing crimes, selling the drugs or breaking into houses and stealing things and selling them on the black market. So there we're looking at the motivation. The motivation is survival, right? And they don't care if they're going to get caught again. They're willing to risk that. That's why we see people go back to jail over and over and over again, because they had no legitimate means of achieving. I could see the same exact thing applying to cyber criminals. If we were to take a cyber criminal who got caught, was prosecuted, served his time, came out and wasn't picked up by one of the security firms immediately as a new hire, right? What do they call them, gray hats? Is that, anybody heard the term like white hat, black hat, gray hat? Okay. So you know, if he's not offered a job right away at one of the security firms, what's he gonna do? He's got a skill, he's gonna go right back to doing it and risk being caught again. So deterrence is very difficult to measure, and I think that's why I avoided it, but it's a great discussion. I find it fascinating, the idea of discussing or attempting to measure the absence of an action.
Well, I think in this situation too, we have to look back to your assertion that these crimes fall into the dark figure category. So from an academic perspective, when we teach this in the classroom, we say, well, cyber crimes are underreported. So the criminal perceives there's very little chance that they're going to be caught.
Exactly.
And even if they are caught, that they will be pursued through
Sure.
legal means because it's too costly, there's holes in the law, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think we go back then to this idea that even if deterrence were a motivator to keep someone from doing a crime, the cyber criminal's perception is that there's very little chance that I will be caught.
Exactly.
So I'm willing to take the risk.
Exactly.
Back to the three-part with guardianship, there's very little guardianship over cybercrime right now. Jurisdiction is a huge issue, especially when I have to go investigate any of these, the best one on the college campus right now is OU is the job scan. Work from home. They get an email, they respond to the email, they start talking, next thing you know, they receive a check in the mail from somebody who wasn't even the person they were talking to, delivered by somebody who wasn't the address it was sent to, and they still cash the check, and they send it off to the number, and once in a while, they're out $30,000.
Yep.
Well, where is this person? Who are they networking with? By the time I track back to this person to, I don't know, Nigeria is a popular country of the day, I have local jurisdiction. I can't touch it. And if I feed them off to the FBI, NWC or any of the agencies that are engineers that handle or at least designated to handle the internet-related crimes, $60,000. The FBI is looking for the guys that are soaking millions.
Yep.
They're added to the stack, and these guys know it.
And then assuming we have a capable guardianship in place, we then go back to the demographics that we understand that many of these types of criminals are that type A personality, where even if they know there's a chance they're going to get caught, they think they're smarter, they're the overachiever, I'm going to outsmart you, it's a game, the thrill seeker, that whole thing. So deterrence really becomes a fuzzy concept in that type of scenario, because even if we have the deterrent in place, it's the characteristic of the offender who just assumes they can outsmart it, and they're just going to go right past it. Question?
So looking at the dates you have for the theories, are there any new theories being developed in regards to cyber? Because you think about the deterrence is like you said, is way different, but even like the intent isn't always, it's just like how smart I am. You know,
Yeah.
Look what I can do. It's more of a show off in some cases.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it kind of comes back to the need for uniformity amongst the fields. So those dates are so old because most of the criminological theories stem from the sociology camp that was set up. They all come out of the Chicago school at the turn of the century. If you can imagine America at that time, you know, you've got densely populated cities, and you have, you know, various ethnic backgrounds and all sorts of things like that. These theories that I highlighted here are like the baseline. They're like the starting platform. Now, any one of these we could pull, and we could come up with probably between 5 and 10 different authors who have stacked on their slight change to the theory, moving throughout time, as late as the 2000s. So do we have a specific cyber theory in criminology? Not that I'm aware of. But I think a lot of these apply, and I have seen, where we've started using these theories as the basis for cyber studies. Now, if someone else in a different field has created a cyber theory, I wouldn't be aware of it. I haven't come across it yet, but within criminology, we have not designed, to the best of my knowledge, a specific one recently. Going back?
So what working groups are you getting together with cyber?
Me personally?
Or your group? If you want to bring this together? What type of working groups are coming together to throw this up against the wall and see what sticks?
I'm not sure. But I would suggest that right now, we seem to find ourselves in a climate where practitioners in the field, subject matter experts, and the technical experts are kind of working separately. And where they do come together, it's like this new innovative thing. It's like this big exciting thing. Oh, this hasn't been done before. I would suggest that we heavily emphasize a partnership between those three entities in order to try these things out. In different studies that I've been a part of, we've reached out to law enforcement practitioners and said, are the theoretical concepts, the ideas that we're working with, accurately reflecting what you're seeing in the field? Those are the partnerships that we really need to be happening in order to see if we can make this work. There's another question.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on the FBI's use of their current practice now, where they're actually posting on their most wanted list of cyber criminals. In particular, in the last few years, they posted a number of the Chinese PLA soldiers who are hacking. And it's always been assumed, and I could be wrong, that the Chinese hack as a organization, as a group, not as an individual. So what do you think the FBI's, obviously they must have thought about it a lot. Why are they doing this, and what kind of deterrence value does that really serve?
Awareness is always good when it comes to crimes. If you have an outbreak of crimes in a certain area, if we say, attention city of Norfolk, you're experiencing a ton of car break-ins again, right? It brings awareness, it puts everyone on guard. Be aware of the emails being sent to you, look for those weird typos, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of a deterrent effect, those hackers are so sophisticated, they're gonna smile at that and carry on with their day.
Right.
And we're not expecting the average Joe to engage on a quest to go round up those hackers. But I think with awareness comes vigilance, I guess, but not so much a deterrent, I would suspect.
Sir, the reason that we do that, my name is Darren Spencer, I'm with the Cybercrime Squad for the FBI. No, but the reason that we did that, so we can start identifying individuals. So now that we identify this individual as bad guy, now we can put him on our no-fly zone or no-fly list. So now when that individual leaves China
Thought that would help.
and flies to somewhere else and comes up red,
Sorry, I don't know.
we can get that individual.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay, so we started the whole process
Thank
of
you.
what we've been doing for terrorists, and now we're treating cyber criminals.
And normally, when you start talking state actors, you really never see faces.
Right.
You just
Yeah.
see it's
Yep.
bad guy group B, But when we do find these faces, we do want to put those faces out on blast, if you will. So when they do fly to Taiwan, fly anywhere else, they come up on a no-fly zone, hey, this is a bad guy. Hey, if we have an agreement with that country. I have seen special agents get on a plane, toll Thursday, fly to Romania, and pick up bad guy D, and fly back and home by Sunday. We'll do that stuff. Not with China. Not with
So,
China.
No,
do,
I was very curious, because when they started doing that, it seemed like a complete new thing that the FBI has never done with cyber criminals. And so I was kind of curious, especially when you talk about state actors, so that does make sense.
Ma'am, I apologize.
no, this is the type of discussions that, this is a workshop. I feel like we should be fostering these things. Go ahead.
A great presentation, first of
Oh,
all.
thank you.
I'm a criminologist and I work with the Secure Project, and we do now is cybersecurity, cybercrime.
Oh, nice.
And we do like that with labeling theory, social bond theory.
Yeah,
When you talk about cybersecurity.
labeling's a good one.
Well,
Yeah.
cybercrime and cyberspace, which is a global phenomenon. One of the things we look at a lot is that by deterrence and enforcement, is that there's certain countries and certain things that are no laws at all, where it's absolutely okay for someone to steal your identity. And then you know they're not going to be prosecuted, and so you can identify that to your country, or in a global market, where the bad guy has no fear of being caught. Because of that, what you're challenging
to enforce that kind of thing. So from a theoretical standpoint of view, they are just like street criminals. They don't plan to get caught. They know you're not going to catch them. And so when you think about cyber crime, it must be thought of in a bigger picture, not just in Norfolk, but what's happening around the world where you don't have that deterrent effect, investigative effect, or even personal effect. And then I guess the second thing I'll finish up with looking at a labeling theory that bad guys don't see themselves as criminals.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm not a hacker. I'm just a guy playing around. I'm not a robber. So I think that from a theoretical standpoint, getting people to self-identify is part of the challenge as well.
Yeah, I mean, what you're hitting on is self-conceptualization. Oftentimes, I feel that in studying crime, we underestimate the importance of ego as a motivating factor. Do I see myself as criminal? The person with collateral sanctions, who has no legitimate means of making money, who is selling drugs to feed their 3 kids at home, they don't see themselves as criminal. Do they know they can go to jail? Yeah. But the idea that we can place all our chips on the deterrence wheel, that's not going to work. We need to delve into these subcultures, understand their cultural elements, understand their motivations, and work our way backwards from there.
So we've all seen, I assume, the mayhem that played out on the London Bridge last week or so. And then the news media gears up and they're telling us that their Brits have been tracking 23,000 people. And we've seen time and time again for the last 15, 20 years that in most cases they say, well, we knew about this guy. We knew about this guy. We knew about that group. And then they go off and act. And typically they were being tracked for some period of time. They didn't want any law. So we stopped it because of limitation of resources. So from all that criminology theory that you've been working on, Kaitlin, do you see any hope of coming up with something that would make or justify changes in policy so that folks like him and other folks in the law enforcement business could do something to stop that sort of, I don't know how to stop it, but
Yeah.
to prevent those folks from dropping off the radar until they do something bad?
Oh, this is like a 6-hour discussion.
A lot of scotch, I mean, let's go.
What could your view stop with there? Yeah, what we're seeing with a lot of those people is that they're being radicalized online. A lot of those people are citizens of the countries that are attacking. They go away a little bit like one of the guys in India, who was hanging out with his brother and he's a care so they come back and forth on some these people. There's something about what's going on online to suck those people in, and that's where I think the psychology is really helpful. The vulnerability of how people get sucked into perverted groups or groups that have perverted religious ideologies. I think we could all agree that those groups are not good religious people. They've taken their religion and they've perverted it in such a way that they're appealing to people who are just looking for an outlet to act in a horrific way. So if there's some way that we can implement that in that cyber experience, maybe we should be aiming our policies that way. But then we're still talking about this bill. Stop right there. But yeah, I don't want to put it on. Does anyone else have any?
So we're not going to be speaking about the pyramid scheme model of crime. So there's some interesting recent examples of, for example, ransomware, where instead of paying off a ransom, you can instead infect several other people with this ransomware. I don't know if anybody knows this.
That's really interesting. I had only heard of the hostage holding ransomware. I hadn't heard of the pyramid scheme element of it. That seems like that would be a technical solution and not so much, I don't know. Because, if someone gets sucked into that and then said, we'll release your information or whatever we're holding hostage, if you go and commit this other crime and infect these other people and further our operation. In street crime law, we would say that that's not an excuse. When you think about the examples, it is in some scenarios, but we've also seen historical things where, some criminal pulls a gun to someone else's head and says, go rob that ATM, or something like that. It's essentially the same thing we're talking about there. we won't release your stuff unless you go commit this other crime. So in that sense, there's a parallel. But the individual who's deciding to engage in the criminal behavior because their stuff is being held hostage is still making a rational choice to do it. So, I don't know. That one was on the spot, I'm not sure how to really address that or see where the theory would go with that. I taught criminal law for a long time, so that's why I went directly to that. Is that a mistake? But I'm not sure what the theory would say about that. So, I'm over it. Are we good? Okay. Thank you, guys.
You got it?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaitlin.